So I wanted to make a video about, I don't even really know what to call it, but I guess I'm just going to start talking and hopefully by the time I get to the end I'll have come up with a title. There's this thing that happens over the course of coming out trans and transition, and I kind of want to say like early in coming out and transition, but that's not really true. It keeps happening to me. It happens as new things change in my body, in my voice, whatever, presentation. It also happens as I encounter people who I maybe haven't seen for a few months, or who knew I was transitioning but I haven't seen in person or whatever. And it's this sort of back and forth that happens around the idea of the person I used to be, or the person they used to perceive me as, how I used to present, that kind of foregrounds the idea that, like, in some way I need to be patient with, supportive of people's attachments to this girl that they used to know. And I get it, right? I do, and I think it's valid to want a certain amount of patience, a certain amount of understanding about people's process of sort of letting go of who they thought you were. And it's something that I understand because I've been there, right? I mean, on the one hand, I have trans friends who I have known for years and years and watched go through this process and just thought the whole time, like, I know where you're going and I wish I could just pick you up and set you down like 8 months further down the line because you're going to be so much better and happier and safer in your own skin, and I wish I could do it for you. And you can't, you know, people have to walk through it on their own. And so that's happened for me, right? But I have had people in my life who I was close to or I knew in one way, and the way they were was important to me, and it changed. You know, I've had a couple of friends who were part of my community as butches, right? And we had this really small, tight-knit group of butch lesbians in South Central Texas at Baylor University, right? So, Baptist country. And it was just, we were so close-knit and supportive of each other, and we spent all our time together, and 3 of us shared an apartment, and the others were over all the time. There were 4 of us who were real close, but then there were several others who we kind of hung around with as well. And then one of them and then another one started talking about being guys. And I felt hurt, I felt betrayed, and one of them was really uncomfortable and sick of being read as a butch, and so would say some kind of fucked up stuff about, you know, well, you all are just butches, but I'm a man, and as a man, the way that I feel, or the way that I do things is, and I was like, fuck you and your manhood, like, I didn't like hanging around guys before, and I don't want to hang around you now if you're gonna be like this. But the other guy, you know, there was none of that. He just needed to transition. He just was a guy. And it was just like I had this community, and now I don't anymore. I had these people who were like me, and I knew who they were, and they were the same as me, and now they're not anymore. And I've gotten responses like that. I get responses like that from women a lot, as far as, you know, I really liked that you were an assertive woman, a strong woman, a masculine woman. I liked that you were a visibly queer woman, and I feel sort of betrayed. I feel abandoned, you know. I feel like you've, like, joined the other team, you know. And so I get that. I mean, I'm frustrated by it sometimes, but I get that. I've also, believe it or not, heard almost that exact thing from my father. My dad and I had this really sort of intense conversation about, like, he really liked that I was a woman in the way that I was a woman, and that I could do the kind of advocacy work that I could do, and that was, like, that was cool to hear, and I was kind of like I wish I'd heard it, you know, 5 years sooner when I was excited about being, or trying to be a queer activist woman, but it was cool to see that he'd kind of come that far with me, because those were some of the questions I asked myself before transition. Anyway, tangent. So I hear that a lot. There's also a thing that I hear a lot about sort of loss of attraction, potential relationship, you know, not that you're together, right, but that you could be together. And I definitely felt some of that with the second guy that I talked about a minute ago, with Dominic, because we never really talked. I mean, we kind of talked, but not really, not like that. We kind of talked about talking. But I was into him, I thought he was cute, I thought he was another butch that, like, I could be safe with and I felt comfortable enough with, that there was potential there, you know, we could at least flirt a little bit, there was some romantic energy, and not that we were gonna be together, but just that it was possible, and I think that sense of possibility, that sort of space of, like, this could happen, we could engage in this way, is another kind of community. It's another kind of shared space that becomes very important, and that can really hurt to lose. And so that's one that I hear sometimes, and sometimes just get a vibe about from lesbians especially, who I was close to pre-transition, early in transition, and then sometimes kind of disappear for a while. Sometimes kind of disappear and never come back. But then it's like we have to relearn how to interact, you know? Is there still this attraction present? Are we still gonna have this kind of flirty thing? Is it gone now? Am I too masculine presenting, or is it too uncomfortable for you to be attracted to somebody who walks in the world in the way that I do? So there's that whole new thing to negotiate. And then there's a thing about losing somebody who was something specific to you, you know, losing your daughter, and I've talked a lot about that with my dad, and a little bit with my mom, and actually talked quite a bit about it with my paternal grandmother as well, and I've been here, not in terms of family members, really, but I've had a couple of relationship partners, one of whom presented really as a femme woman when we got together, and I loved it. Like, she was this kick-ass femme powerhouse. I don't even know. Like, she was this amazing power femme, and she was so tough, and so, like, didn't take shit from anybody, and ultra high femme, mini skirts, high-heeled boots, I mean, long hair, and it was amazing. It was so fucking cool, and I loved it about her, and I loved the way that she was, and then she wasn't her anymore, right? And I was totally attracted to her as a butch. I still think he's very attractive. And I liked that Z was feeling more comfortable in her own skin, although there were, you know, some growing pains and uncomfortable moments, as I think there always are. And in both of those relationships, a large part of what ended them was the fact that I was kind of moving farther into masculinity as my partner was figuring out her own kind of masculine identity. And so that was tough. I mean, and that was hardest, I think, of those three kinds of interactions that I've had with people. It was really, really hard to have this sense of, I know who you are and I'm intimate with you as this person. And now, it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, right? It's like, a minute ago, you were my amazing, sexy, tough, high femme girlfriend, and now you're this, like, genderqueer butch top, and I'm into it, but I feel like all of a sudden there's this thing happening where the person you were didn't even exist, and she existed to me, right? And I think that's maybe the hard piece for people to deal with. But I also wanted to throw a little bit out there about what it's like from the perspective of the trans person, right? Because, like I say, I understand the point of view of the other person in the relationship, who obviously can be trans, given that I've had these experiences as well, but the person whose transition in this interaction is not foregrounded anyway, right? It's really weird, because, to be honest, I don't even remember myself as a girl, right? I mean, I can pull out a photo of myself when I was 14 or 15, I've got long hair, and I'm wearing women's clothing, and sometimes makeup, sometimes earrings, you know, femme jewelry and stuff, and I recognize them. I mean, but it's like looking at a photo of an old friend who you haven't seen in a while, or a family member who lives in another state. It's like, I know who that person is, but it's not like looking at a photo of me. And when I remember running in a high school track meet, alright, I remember it the way it was, right? I remember that I was running against women, I remember that I was wearing the women's uniform, but I see myself in my head as a boy. I just do. It's, and it's bizarre the way that my memory has sort of overwritten itself, but at the same time it doesn't entirely surprise me. Like, I've always, when I sleep, when I'm dreaming, I'm always a guy. Usually male-bodied. I mean, sometimes I have dreams about transition, and then obviously not. But yeah, I'm male-bodied when I dream. I'm a guy, always. And so, and have been for as long as I can remember, which you'd think would have tipped me off sooner, right? But not so much. And so for me, even as I understand the kind of grieving process that people are going through, there's this very surreal mind-fucking thing that starts to happen as far as you're grieving somebody who never existed, right? It's like listening to somebody talk to you about their imaginary friend who died, and I just kind of want to, and like, they've had all of these conversations and interactions and history with this person, right? And not only are they talking about this pretend person who they've got all of this history with, but all the stuff they're talking about having done and experienced with that person, you remember them doing with you, right? So it's like, I was there, I was the one interacting with you, being present with you, but you couldn't see me. You saw this other person who didn't even exist. And it's not, you know, I encounter some trans folks who seem to feel a real sense of dislike or hostility for their past imaginary self, right? For the boy that people thought they were, the girl that people thought they were. And I don't. I mean, I hear the way people talk about her, and I think I probably would have liked her. Like, she sounds like a pretty kick-ass person. I would probably, you know, take her out and buy her a drink. Both, you know, butch me and straight cisgender me. Straight cisgender female me. But I don't feel like I ever knew her, right? And so it's like there's this person who's in the middle of your life, who everybody who knows you is intimate with, and you've never seen them, and you don't know them, and so on the one side, for the person who's on the outside of the transition, I think it does sometimes feel like I've stepped in and taken over for Ashley, right? Ashley's the one who's supposed to be here having this interaction with me, being a girl, being a butch, and here's this guy Ash instead, and I don't know how this happened. For me, though, it really is kind of like my entire personal history has been hijacked by this other person who doesn't even exist, but everybody else who knew me pre-transition is absolutely convinced existed, right? Is real and important and as central to me as she is for them, and it's like, I never knew her, guys. I mean, she just wasn't there. But for everybody else, she was. So, I'm just throwing that out there, you know, not to say that it's a bad thing to be patient with your friends or loved ones, because I think it's good, I think it's appropriate. But I just I want to push back a little bit on the idea that trans folks are the only ones who need patience with this. I think it's appropriate to ask for a little bit of time, ask for a little bit of understanding as somebody transitions. I also think it's really important to kind of bear in mind what this is like for the person transitioning, right? And we all experience this a little differently. I don't mean to say that my experience of it is the only one. But I do think it's characteristic of the way that a lot of people kind of process through this. Like, we reach a point in transition where we just are who we are. And it's not like I traded in my body, you know? It's not like they gave me a new brain when I started testosterone. This is who I've always been. It's just that nobody else could see it at the time.